Good afternoon, everybody. I am Council President Gabe Agbunos and Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee. And this Thursday afternoon, April 21st, we have two items on the agenda today. We will be discussing the proposed and recommended operating budget by the County Executive for the Office of Human Rights. And then we will begin a series of conversations over several days regarding the budget of the Department of Health and Human Services. But we begin with the Office of Human Rights. And of course, I'm joined as always by my colleagues, Council Members Glass and Rice, and appreciate their continued leadership in so many ways. So Mr. Mia, thank you for putting together this wonderful packets. We appreciate your leadership as well. And I believe we have Director Stowe with us, as well as Jane Okira from OMB. Hello, Jane. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us as well. So why don't I turn it over to you to say some opening comments, Mr. Stowe. I just want to, as we always try and do, express our deepest appreciation and respect for your work and that of the department as well as the commission. We know how challenging, looks like we may have lost James. So why don't we wait a moment? We're just waiting for Director Stowe to jump back on.
Mr. Chair, I just want to let you know that unfortunately Comcast is doing some service on the broadband trunk lines in this area, and so I may be going in and out. So,
okay, no problem. Thanks for telling us. Maybe that's what's happening to Mr. Stowe. Just got a note, he's coming back on. Thank you for rejoining us, Director Stowe. If you can unmute and turn your camera on. Equin, do you know if Director Stowe is able to turn his camera and audio on?
I believe he's with us, but he's not turning it on just yet.
Okay. Let's give it another minute. Director Stowe, if you can hear us, could turn your camera on and your audio. There he is.
Oh,
all right.
goodness gracious.
That's all right.
I don't know what's happening on this technical end.
That's okay. We finished, Jim, and you got everything you asked for. So,
listen,
right.
listen. Say no more. I will say this before I got disconnected. I thought you were saying some good things about me, but I didn't.
I
didn't get a chance to hear that, and so I hope that was recorded because I do want to share that with my wife and my family.
That's right. I'm kidding, of course, but I was just picking up where we left off. I was just praising you and your team. This council has been very aggressive in ensuring that through the lens of racial equity and inclusion, that we address a myriad of challenges in our community, and your office is on the front lines of many of the policies and bills and legislation that this council has passed. And we've done our best to add some additional support that I know you have been asking for reasonably for quite some time. And we also know the need has grown exponentially since the pandemic. So I did want to give you an opportunity to make some opening comments, and then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Mia to walk us through the packet. But Mr. Stowe, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Council President Alvarez, and to also our Vice President of Council Glass, and thank all of you commissioners and council members, I should say, for all you do for not only our community, but particularly for in support of our office. As you indicated, we still continue to try to again build back, not only from a capacity standpoint, but also as all of our colleagues are, not only here locally, but across this country, trying to sort of get back into some sense of operational normalcy within our office itself. And so we continue to transition as far as that's concerned, and always try to very, very best to deliver the services to our community that they in fact expect, but also deserve. At the same time, certainly understanding that our folks are also members of the community too. So they too have gone through the same level of disengagement and other things that have been part of this pandemic. So we put that out there, simply just a statement of fact and not a statement of any excuse or anything else at this point, but that we are getting back. And so we hope that we continue to work with our community to provide the very best services we possibly can. We're submitting you a budget that does, in fact, cover some of our essential needs at this point in time. We always are looking to further expand and in this instance, to get back to kind of where we were in terms of some of our numbers. The task that you very appropriately stated, Mr. President, that are only growing. And as I mentioned last time we were together in a actual work session dealing with another matter, not the budget, but one of the things that I want so desperate to be able to do is to get in front of some of these issues. And I would love to be able to have the wherewithal to do that. Resource-wise, we still struggle as far as that is concerned. And much of it is just being able to have that connectivity to our community. And of course, we're working very closely with the folks over in our Office of Community Partnership. But I must tell you, it is still very difficult, even with that being the case, not having firsthand knowledge. And so much of the work that I end up doing directly as part of our office is work that is done, as you might imagine, with phone calls and other kinds of communications that don't rise to the level of maybe being assigned to somebody else. It's something you got to do yourself. And so as a result of that, we just know we can do so much in a given day, in a given week, in a given month, et cetera. However, the upside of all this is that we continue to serve. That's why we're here, right? We want to serve the people of this community in the best way we possibly can, and to give them benefit of our best thoughts and best work and best efforts. And so I'm pleased to share with you that our staff is doing just that. And so I would just again, I apologize. Just that in terms of trying to move to a place where we can more adequately address the concerns. And so the additional people we have on board, and we'll be getting on board, by the way, will help us do that. I will also just simply suggesting that it's tough out there trying to find good people, as you all may have known, experienced yourselves, and folks that they have choices. And we actually extended offers to individuals, and they were, in some instances, at least 2 instances were declined because people had better offers. And so is that kind of environment. And so we continue to work, and we hope to be able to satisfy the additional vacancies that you were able to give us and support us for, as well as the county executive, as soon as we are possibly able to do that. So we'll continue to work toward that. And once those people are in place, that will give us some additional capacity and be able to help us out a little bit further with what I mentioned a little early on in my comments. Lastly, let me just say this again, by way of appreciation for the work you all have done, and rightly stated again, Mr. President, of you all leaning forward in terms of providing the kinds of protections in our community. And I should tell you too, unmatched in many other communities across this country, because I talk to my colleagues on a weekly and monthly basis. So thank you for your sense of what's fair, what's right, for all of our residents in this community. While it does push us and certainly areas where we love to have additional capacity, at least it sets the bar. It sets the kind of community we want to be, the measurement stick, if you will, of what we believe is important for all of our residents. And so I want to thank you all for your leadership. And I said lastly, now I'm connected with a religious experience now, so I'm come for that. So Councilmember Rice, I got at least 3 finals that I always say. And so the last one would include this. I just say this as a personal privilege, if you don't mind. I just want to thank you all for the leadership that you all have given us, period. You are a very non-unique persons who bring an enormous amount of skills and talents to the table of government and governance, and is appreciated. And I don't know if we often get a chance to maybe say that to you all directly. But I do want to say that in my comments. Thank you all for what you do, the sacrifices that you all go through to provide that for our community. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Stowe. Mr. Mee, I'll turn it over to you to walk us through the packet.
Okay, thank you, Council President. The county executive is recommending a funding level, an FY23 funding level of $1.6 million for the Office of Human Rights. This is actually a 7.7% decrease from the FY22 level. However, I will note that the decrease is due to a number of one-time operating expenses that are that were approved by the council in FY22 and are now being moved out of the 23 budget. And mostly these expenses are related to the one-time outreach campaign for the Ban the Box and Housing Justice Act legislation that was the council approved last year. There is a $25,000 increase for the partnership fund. This is a fund that provides partial compensation for property damage and personal liability to victims of racial, ethnic, religious, sexual orientation, or disability-based crimes. The office is reporting that they've been getting about 2 to 3 claims a year, and the damages are capped at about $2,000 for property claims and $4,000 for personal injury claims per incident. So $25,000 will be able to cover the recent level of claims that have been that the office has been receiving. Council staff recommends approval of the executive's recommended budget. I will also note that the Montgomery County Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation has requested funding of $56,000 in FY23. This was not included in the executive's recommended budget. It is one-time funding, and as you'll see on page 2 of the packet, the funding pays for a number of activities, including travel to Montgomery, Alabama to meet with the Equal Justice Initiative, holding 2 half-day program seminars, performing a soil ceremony, community recognition events, hiring a 3-month consultant to support Montgomery History Program, as well as producing printed materials, marketing, advertising materials, and also some funding for Remembrance Market installation events. The activities here are in line with the Commission's work, but however, because of the fiscal uncertainty we're looking at in terms of reducing costs to the FY23 budget, I am recommending we defer consideration of this funding request until mid-year, until we have a better sense of what the funding macro funding picture looks like. But I will note these are one-time events, so they're not adding to the base budget, but they are costs that will be incurred in FY23. That is it on my part.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and Mr. Chair. And thank you very much, Director Stowe, and thank you, Mr. Villa, as well. I have been in contact with the county executive specifically around this particular funding outlay. And I was under the understanding that the county executive may be sending over a supplemental. That was the conversation that I've had with the county executive. However, what I would like to do, Mr. Chair, and beg the indulgence of the committee, just in case, I would ask that we just put this on the reconciliation list for now. I do think that it will automatically come off once we get that supplemental, and I have the utmost confidence that what the county executive told me is going to be what indeed happens. And so from that perspective, I think that this isn't something that's even going to affect us moving forward, but just want to be safe rather than sorry in terms of us making sure that we move forward with this incredibly important project that all of us have been in tremendous support for. So I would just ask for the moment that we put this on the reconciliation list, and then hopefully won't even have to worry about it as the county executive may send over that supplemental. That would be
that's the 56,000, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. I support that.
Second. Sure.
Okay. Great. So without objection, then we'll support placing the 56,000 on the reconciliation list.
And Mr. Mia, my staff will be in contact with you to make sure that we get that as soon as possible. As soon as my staff hears confirmation that the supplemental is there, we can go ahead and dispense of taking it off of the reconciliation list. But just wanted to make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's with an important project. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. President, I can report that I do believe that went out late on yesterday, Councilman Rice. So I do think that is in the works if it's not already been received from the county executive.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Council Vice President Glass.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the way you started this conversation by highlighting the work that the office has been doing and that we have been hearing Director Stowe loud and clear during our term and for the years that he has been here about the incredible workload that he's taken on due to us, legislators introducing legislation and helping continue to make Montgomery County a safe and welcoming place for everybody and make sure that every employee feels safe in their work environment, right? And those are the great things that the office does. Yet in this budget, once again, there is no increase in personnel or full-time equivalents. And so understanding the situation that we are in and the way that the council is trying to operate through this budget, Mr. Stowe, my just general question for you is, in recognizing that you are defending this budget, if there was more money available, where do you think the best application within the office would be? What action desperately needs more hands to help them?
We don't have a high-level program person that might be in the business of trying to ensure then that we are meeting the necessary needs to adequately address concerns that are brought to our attention. Case in point, we just had, of course, the Afghanistan folks who were trying to find residence here. And so we had a special meeting to do those kind of things. Well, right now, I attend all those things. Anytime there's an outside kind of interest that goes on involving those kind of things, primarily those are things that I attend. I'd like my staff to focus on making sure we do the base level things, complaints, those kind of things. And I try then to do those things. I get a little help from other folks on our staff. So if I had someone in a high level managerial program managerial position, right, to me, that would be extremely helpful to be able then to move that forward. Investigations are like everything else. You said the thing, so I'll stop there. If you didn't give me an opportunity to go any further, Councilman Glass, so I'll stop there.
No. My dogs, you'll hear them. They want more. So if you're willing to give a little bit more,
so it ties back into again this whole idea about investigations too. When you lose 30-year people, 25-year people, you don't get, obviously, the return on a new incoming person immediately. And so we are trying, in even this look we've got now out there, to find folks who can come in and hit the ground running. And so an additional investigator that might have that kind of wherewithal would be extremely helpful to us. And I'm talking about having him or her then deal with some of the more complicated kinds of issues that require a little more in-depth analysis than just trying to, ask what the facts are, and then go to the level of applying our ordinance to that particular set of facts. And so I've always wanted that kind of person to be able to be that investigator, if you will, that might have those kinds of skill sets and can really pursue those things and do some in-depth work. We've always wanted to work with the EEOC on those kind of systemic cases that require what I'm sharing with you in terms of skill sets. And that sometimes has a bigger bang for the buck, if you will, in trying to weed out ongoing systemic kind of racism that maybe we can't do in one given set of an investigation exercise. So that might be the second sort of piece of it that I'll be looking for. So those would be probably the 1-2 punch that would help us out immensely. But again, you said if, and I heard that loud and clear. But at any rate, that's kind of where we are right now.
I'm doing battle between my dogs.
No worries. I had the same
There was a
situation.
squirrel taunting them outside, I think.
Yes.
But I appreciate you identifying the EEOC, right? And that's what I was just really trying to get at. What is the work, right? And where are those investigations and inquiries? And I appreciate you saying that clearly. I'm not going to make a motion at this time, understanding the fiscal realities that we've entered this conversation in. But we all recognize again that you all could use a little help to support the efforts that we are handing to you, that our residents need and are demanding. And so I appreciate you enumerating upon it, and perhaps we circle back in this conversation, depending on how the budget process goes. So thank you, Mr. President.
Well, and that brings up a good point, Council Vice President Glass. Maybe what we should do then is, because we have added a lot to your plate these last 2.5 years in particular, I think we're due for a check-in, just to, generally speaking, see how things are going at a high level. Aside from the budget process, which is, of course, in the midst of everything else going on, sometimes somewhat chaotic. So maybe, Mr. Mia, we can aim to come back in September when we've had a chance to catch our breath a little bit, check in, and Mr. Stowe give you some time to prepare between now and then, and give us an update on how the implementation is going for the myriad of different pieces of legislation we've tasked your office with implementing.
Good enough. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Stowe. We appreciate you very much and your team. And so with that, we will now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the beginning of our discussion regarding the Department of Health and Human Services. We are joined now, I want to acknowledge, by Essie McGuire. Essie, of course, is very ably assuming many of the pieces within the portfolio that Linda McMillan used to handle, and we all feel very fortunate that she's continuing that really terrific infrastructure and legacy. So thank you so much, Essie. And we, of course, are joined by the incredible Dr. Kroll, who I know has been working tirelessly 7 days a week plus, and his team has really been performing heroically through some extraordinarily challenging times. So since this is our first operating budget work session, I won't be able to do this for every single one of these because we've got so many of them, Dr. Kroll, but given this is our first one as a committee, I'll give you a chance to make some opening comments.
Thank you, Council President Albornoz and Committee Chair Albornoz, and to the team. Good to be with you all again. And I recognizing that I won't need to do an opening session commentary on everything that we do for the next week or so, but this is a good opportunity to talk with you, if I can, for just a few minutes about HHS and this year's budget. I think this year's budget reflects several realities. One is the continuing hardship that our county residents have faced as a result of the pandemic, and the expectation that those hardships will continue for many months, if not years into the future. And the second one is that the pandemic has revealed and once again outlined, and in some cases exacerbated, longstanding needs in our community: hunger and the need to address food sufficiency, a lack of affordable housing and associated risks of homelessness, the long documented mental health needs and inadequacy of the county, state, and national service system, the impact of longstanding and reduced flat budgets from recession years, especially in HHS and its programs. As a side note, we have operated for many years with temporary staff to fill in the gaps and get the work done. And during the pandemic, we doubled that number easily, if not more. And then, of course, the flat infrastructure in the face of substantial growth in our contracts, for example, 400 contracts some years ago to 700 now, without a concomitant increase in support and capacity to manage that work. There are continuing needs in the county. Substance abuse and overdoses have continued to plague us throughout this pandemic and show no signs of letting up. And providers have been struggling to recover, rehire, and retain staff. And I think some of our support for them is reflected in the inflationary adjustments for nonprofits that we put forward through the county executive's budget. Over the last year, we have in the last 6 months, responded to 5 catastrophic events involving people who were displaced because of explosions or fires or floods, and continue to do that work on an ongoing basis. We have continued our work on overdose prevention and suicide injury and self-injury. We managed to open the Neville Street shelter in the midst of the pandemic, special nods to everyone that was involved in that. And in the last year, our Office of Emergency Support Services has served over 190,000 people in assisting them in obtaining local, state, and federal benefits like TANF, Medicaid, and Medicare. This year alone, we served 12,000 people in our behavioral health system, 3,000 of those in the crisis center, and sadly, almost 3,000 who are served by our abused persons and victims of assault and sexual services. Our outreach teams and our school-based staff have responded to tragedies across the county, Magruder, Plumgar starting last summer, and others. Street Outreach Network is one of the teams, but we also deploy linkages to learning, mobile crisis, and other parts of the department to respond to those needs. And then lastly, I think CEF through our rental assistance efforts, have put out $100 million in funding to keep people safe and in their homes to date, and there's more of that to come. For FY23, I think we recognize that those services are going to continue, and that we need to strengthen the capacity of HHS as a department and the Health and Human Services continuum represented by our providers. We're working with developmental disabilities and adult daycare providers to strengthen their support, their capacity. Our child and adult protective services are being supported in its recommended budget, strengthening our school-based health services, among other things. You'll hear about those over the next few sessions, so you won't hear me repeat this again. Racial equity and social justice remains a priority for the department, for me personally, for the county executive, as does our continued efforts as is evidenced by our continued efforts to serve and vaccinate and test communities of color, communities who are most severely affected. It's made tangible in increases to the food budget, $2 million to the core budget, and an additional $4 million in one-time only funding for food assistance, the substantial expansions to the MHIPS budgets, and strengthening our efforts to offer mobile services, both through the contracts with Casa Rubin that you all have facilitated, and through the plans for Health and Human Services to develop mobile services to go to places where people can't access us. And then lastly, of course, our Newcomers Initiative all reflect a growing and increasingly strong commitment to addressing communities of color. Already on the issue of ready access, which is one of my goals, we have worked to expand online portals to make sure people have access to us throughout the pandemic, and at the same time maintain some hybrid access to services for people who don't have the skills to do the work to access us online. Our mobile crisis has expanded, and we're implementing civic.gov to make sure that our folks who need licensing services and support services can get those. Our partnership in navigation is strong through our efforts to help navigate our system is strong through our partners and the implementation of a variety of services like our ongoing collaboration with the hubs. And then lastly, I think our goal has been to keep our workforce supported and effective, and to make sure that we have sufficient numbers to do the work, and that they are well trained and capable of doing the work quickly and efficiently for the residents that come through our doors. There is more as we get into the conversation that I will share with you all as we get into the budget detail itself, but I will stop for now and say thank you. Happy to have a chance to talk this through with you all and come to a budget that will serve the needs of our county residents most effectively. So thank you.
Thank you, and well said. Essie, I will turn it over to you to walk us through the packet.
Thank you, Mr. Albornoz. I'll just start off with a few overview comments regarding the budget, but also regarding the committee's review. As you noted, this is the first of at least a handful of HHS committee review sessions to review the DHHS budget. The first page of your packet does show the rough outline of how we plan to address the service areas at this time. However, certainly that can be adjusted a little bit as we go through. There may be follow-up items and issues that need to be brought back. But today's packet does address most of administration, except those programs that are under the Office of Community Affairs. We've also brought the food security funding and other related food security funds to this discussion today, and my colleague Naeem Mia is here to help speak about those. And then we'll wrap up today with aging and disability services. And then next week, again, move on to other service areas as well. We also, of course, have a number of items that are covered jointly with the HHS and also the Education and Culture Committee, and there are a couple of meetings set up to address those joint items. The first one of those is tomorrow, and so we'll begin that review tomorrow, and again, that will also continue as we go forward. Again, keeping in mind that given the breadth and scope, there's always the opportunity to adjust and to revisit as we go through this review process over the coming weeks. So the county executive's budget for the Department of Health and Human Services is an increase of $57.9 million or 15.9% above the FY22 level. Much of that increase, approximately $54.1 million, is in the county general fund, and there's also an increase in the grant fund as well. Each of the service areas of within the departments does increase in the county executive's recommendation, and that's outlined for you on page 2 of your packet. As Dr. Kroll was outlining, certainly DHHS has been front and center and on the front lines of the pandemic response, the emergency response throughout the pandemic. And what you'll see in this budget, I think, really is both a commitment to continuing those services and undergirding that safety net that, of course, is so critical, and also trying to take that next look ahead as well at what infrastructure needs to be carried forward. How will we bridge that forward? And I think that much of the work of the coming year will be to continue to refine that discussion and to understand what bridges need to be built to that future-looking infrastructure. Mr. Albornoz, as Council President, has requested that the Council staff and the committees in Council do take a look at increases to the budget in the context of fiscal affordability constraints. And so you will see as we go through the packet opportunities identified by Council staff in certain areas where there may be an opportunity for a reduced increase or for deferred funding if the committee and the Council feel that such an action is necessary for affordability considerations. Certainly in a department like Health and Human Services, those opportunities are few and certainly must be heavily considered. But again, we will work to try to point out opportunities that the committee could consider that might be feasible if necessary for affordability. The racial equity and social justice lens is certainly critical with DHHS, and certainly in keeping with the Council's legislation. The budget narrative does outline the approach that the executive took to applying that racial equity and social justice lens to the development of its budgets. In addition to the global review that the executive went through with departments in development, the budget also does identify certain initiatives and increases that specifically address those disparities and other issues raised in this approach. And the Council staff will highlight those as we go through. Again, certainly, and again, as was very evident in Dr. Kroll's remarks, the very much of this department is certainly very attuned to this really critical issue and to addressing those disparities in a wide array of areas. And finally, public testimony is ongoing. Of course, the Council is still continuing to receive that testimony, and Council staff will continue to bring that in as we go forward. Some things have come in sort of after the packet came out, and we'll just again continue to bring that forward, and certainly Council members will raise it also, but again, keeping in mind that this will be an ongoing review opportunity. So that's it for the overview. If you'd like me to continue into the administration issues, or I'll pause there if there's any questions on any of that information.
No, I'll just note a couple of things, Ms. McGuire, sort of at the outset. As you noted, in this department's budget in particular, especially given the pressing needs that we have, it's unlikely that we're going to find very much of anything at all to certainly cut, possibly defer, but not cut. And I know there are additional interests beyond what is in the county executive's budget that I would not be surprised, and this committee has never held back before on identifying a problem and doing what we're supposed to do and trying to solve it. But at the same time, obviously acknowledging that we've got to weigh that with the broader picture. And as we noted yesterday, majority of us on the council noted on Tuesday expressing concern that we have to be cautious and judicious so that we don't set up the next council for failure and the corresponding agencies. So it's a balance, as it is always a balance, but the good news is county executive has provided more than just a good starting point, but the significant increase to HHS's budget is certainly warranted, because of the need, but also because of their work and our belief in that work and in the people who are doing that work. But I just kind of wanted to note that, because I know I have had many meetings in my office, and I'm sure my colleagues as well, both with individual organizations as well as individuals talking about specific needs. I'll note this one track that we took last year, which I thought made sense, was we did add to the base budget across the board to all nonprofits, which helped address to some degree the challenge of picking and choosing which organizations and work we would move forward. We did our best to raise all boats, acknowledging there were unique circumstances in certain areas, particularly in the food security space, given the emergency that we were under. But I would just list that as a general preference, rather than, individual. If we are going to add anything, to do it more holistically than essentially picking some organizations over others, because they all have merit. They all are important, especially given the circumstances that we find ourselves in now. So I'll just note those asterisks that I will be thinking about through that lens as we go through, and I just want to share that. So, but why don't we go ahead and get started and go line item by line item now.
Thank you. So we'll start with some of the issues in administration and support. And the first issue is, as you've highlighted, Mr. Albornoz, the issue related to the executive's recommendation for an inflationary adjustment to eligible nonprofit contracts. There is typically an action taken each year. In most years, certainly there have been some extreme years recently, but typically the budget does provide for an inflationary increase to certain contracts that otherwise would not have an opportunity to have an increase and would be flat funded. For FY23, the county executive recommends a total of $4.2 million in the DHHS budget to provide a 6% inflationary increase to eligible contracts. I would note that also, similar to your point, Mr. Albornoz, the executive did apply the logic of this eligibility to contracts in other departments as well. And there is about $5.7 million in the budget as a whole. That includes other departments such as recreation, but others as well. And we can provide that list to the council. But in DHHS, it would total $4.2 million. I'm sorry, did you?
Yeah, I apologize. Councilmember Rice chimed in. He wanted to make a comment.
No. It'll be after Ms. McGuire. Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it. And I see Dr. Kroll's hand is up. Dr. Kroll.
We can wait until she's done.
Got it.
I will be quick. I do just want to highlight that, so certainly, and again, in public testimony and after the packet was printed, so it's not in here, but I do want to flag that certainly the council has received significant advocacy, both in the form of correspondence and in public testimony from nonprofit providers and Nonprofit Montgomery, requesting not only support for the 6% at a minimum, but also requesting an increase for additional support beyond this, and certainly noting the extraordinary circumstances that have taken place in recent years. Council staff is supportive of an inflationary increase, of course. I did want to point out that this could be an opportunity for an affordability adjustment if the council feels that that is necessary. The numbers here are large, and a reduction even of 0.5% in the increase would reduce the impact to the budget of approximately $350,000. Certainly that could be done in increments. And again, just wanted to put that forward as a possible consideration. Any adjustments certainly would, recommendation would be to apply those not only within DHHS, but across the board so that there would be a uniform approach, as you were saying.
So I appreciate that. I just speaking for myself, I think the floor for me is the 6%, keeping that as is, and then seeing if at all possible we can consider not necessarily over one specific fiscal year, but maybe two or possibly three, how to increase that 6% to get us to the 10%. Because our nonprofit partners have made a very compelling case that they're having a hard time with recruitment and retention. And of course, as we know, to their credit, they have just been doing the work and then figuring out how to pay for it because of how challenging things have been. And I really want to give HHS a lot of credit, who has shown a lot of flexibility and support administratively and creatively to try and get the money out to the community as quickly as possible. I'd also like to note, Ms. McGuire, that maybe we can explore, in addition to the flat increase that, again, we will talk about now, but talk about in terms of over the next couple of fiscal years. But are there other funds that are out there that we may want to look at that would also raise all boats? I'll give you two examples. One is in rent. So in literally the ability to access space. Most nonprofit organizations have as an expenditure, and some are able to find in-kind space, but many end up having to pay for the use of office space or of programming space. I know we've tried to bring as much of that within county government. I can speak about that in the first person in the recreation department. But could there be a fund that we look at moving forward that could be facilitated by the newly formed grant office, again, in an effort to sort of try and raise all boats? The other areas that I've heard fairly consistently that have been a challenge across the board are in just sort of general administrative support. And so if there is an opportunity, again, there, looking at the lens through the newly formed grant office to see what we might be able to do in that space, then I think that would be another option. And there may be more, but I'd like to see what we can do in other ways beyond just direct financial and cash assistance to alleviate some of the financial pressures that our nonprofits have been under. And, you know, with regards to the space, that could be a win-win. We have seas of commercial office space at the moment that are vacant. And so there may be an opportunity there for us to lift all boats. So I don't know that we'll be able to achieve that within the context of this budget, but I just wanted to signal to our nonprofit partners that you have been heard. We are going to do what we can to support the incredible work that's been going on, even if we can't get to everything in this fiscal year's budget. I'll defer to Councilmember Rice and then Dr. Kroll for some comments. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President / Chair. I'm not sure which title takes precedent, but I guess in this context, maybe Chair. But did just want to highlight everything that you said and put it in context in terms of what the recent funding history looks like. Because over the past 4 years, when you look at averaging out what is roughly about an 8% increase over 4 years, that's 2% per year for these nonprofits. That woefully falls well below what we've even done for our county employees as a whole when it comes to increases. And so from that standpoint, it really is something that I think we need to take into consideration. We heard it from Director Stowe in the previous conversation. And he said that there were folks who rejected the offers because the offers weren't robust enough. And that's what our nonprofits are facing. And so we are going to have to be aggressive because there are choices. And there are so many people that are now incentivized to leave their current positions and go to others. We've seen it across the board in private sector, not just in public sector. And so I applaud both Dr. Kroll and the county executive for putting that 6% there. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. I just feel as though we need to go higher. And so from my perspective, I agree with what you said, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure how much we'll be able to actually get off of our reconciliation list this year, but I do think that it would behoove us to put some sort of tranches onto the reconciliation list to see what we can get off of the rec list this year to add a little bit more. Keeping in mind that if you look at the 5-year period, with the 6% that the county executive has proposed and the 8% from before, you're looking at 14% over the course of a 5-year period, which comes out to 2.8%, still well below not only what CPI is for the region, but also what we've done for our county employees. And so again, keeping that in mind, something more akin to the 10% actually brings us to something right around 3.5%, which is roughly right in line with what we've done for county employees. And so from that standpoint, I really feel as though that's what's fair and equitable for our nonprofit community. And so I'd really like to see us do this maybe in 2 tranches of 2% each. I'm also flexible if folks aren't supportive of that, of doing a different sort of tranche mechanism. But I do think that doing a 2% and a 2% makes the most sense in terms of us trying to see what we can come up with additional resources to help support those that are doing some great work, as you espoused, Mr. Chair, as a part of your comments. So that's what I'd like to move forward with.
I second that.
Yeah, I agree. We're on the same wavelength. We didn't compare notes ahead of time, but I think 2 and 2 makes sense. And obviously it's reconciliation. There's no guarantee it will make it through in the end. But what it also does is, because beyond the 3 of us, all of our colleagues have been especially engaged with our nonprofit partners, in dealing with constituent issues, and will likely have their own organizations or issues that they'd like to move forward. And again, going back to this issue of picking and choosing, we would then have something to point to and raise all boats as a reasonable compromise to be able to adjust some of the contracts, as opposed to, and there still may be some that get adjusted individually given the nature of the work and what we're seeing on the ground, but it makes things a little bit more equitable. So I'm going to go to Dr. Kroll, followed by Council Vice President Glass.
So that I can be very brief, because I essentially second the thought, the sentiments of both Council President Albornoz and Councilmember Rice. Our private providers, our nonprofit providers, we have over 700 contracts, and most of them are with those nonprofit providers. They are in no small way a large part of the lifeblood of what makes HHS work. Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless, Identity, Primary Care Coalitions, Every Mind, names that you are all familiar with, are all set up to benefit from this. And you've talked with them, so you know that they are struggling to incentivize workers in a changing job market, to try to meet the challenges of a minimum or living wage, and competing with what I think is a growing gig economy, where staff are questioning the cost benefits of working in traditional settings versus going out and starting their own businesses and starting up and doing other kinds of things that they can do from pretty much anywhere in the world. I like the idea, Councilmember Alvarez, of thinking about back office support as a way to further support the community. It's something that we've talked about a lot over the last 6 or 7 years or so. So maybe this moment gives us a window to do some of that. I think there is a need for this. The 6%, to Councilmember Rice's point, averages out to 2.8% over the last 5 years, which has not kept up with CPI or the cost of living over the last several years. And so they have been fighting a sliding battle in terms of falling further and further behind. And this is an opportunity to begin to correct some of that.
Great. Council Vice President Glass.
Yes, so I appreciate your comments and Councilmember Rice's comments and Director Kroll's comments too. Let me also just add another element here. One, Ms. McGuire, I appreciate you in the onset saying that the 6% increases, that there is a continuity across county departments and agencies where there are nonprofit organizations helping provide that work. So that is good to hear. And while I absolutely agree the 6% is the floor and support the 2 tranches of 2% each, recognizing we'll see what we can do within context of the entire budget. I also want to inject into this conversation that there are other ways, in addition to the rent that the chair mentioned, there are other ways to support these nonprofit organizations. And we need to continue, I think, refining our processes and take note of the lessons learned during the pandemic, when in the very first few months, everyone snapped into action and we rewrote contracts, we rerouted funding, and we did it almost on a dime, recognizing the work that these organizations and the people working within these organizations were doing was keeping us healthy and safe. And I think that we need to continue working in that direction of streamlining our processes, whereby allowing these organizations to spend less time being minded or possibly doing some tedious paperwork, which then in turn allows them to do the work that we've asked them to do. I'm not saying at all, so don't misunderstand anybody who's following the conversation, that procurement and data and metrics, those are important. But as we've learned over the last 2 years, we have built up such systems here in the county. And with a $6.3 billion budget, there are a lot of systems, but I think it would behoove all of us if we see how we can streamline it. And that is a separate conversation, but it is one that does save time and money for our nonprofits, where they can then use that energy to unleash their talents within our community. And so I would love to have subsequent conversations about whether it is within HHS, whether it is in whatever DPS or wherever it might be, procurement, I presume as well, to see how we can make things a little bit easier within all of the paperwork and processes. But I thought that is important to add to this conversation too. So I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, it's a good point. And to follow up on that, I know that I know firsthand, and I had many conversations with Ms. Buckland throughout the pandemic as systems were being developed on the fly, and how challenging that was, to say the least. And then having to deal with federal regulations and the strings that were attached with a lot of the federal money that came in, and having to comply with all of that was a struggle. And I know we've lost a lot of good people who've retired or have moved on since the beginning of the pandemic. So I do think, Dr. Kroll, similar to a comment that I just made to Director Stowe, maybe it would make sense for us to come back after the summer, sometime September, to check in on the administrative infrastructure of HHS to see how we can better support not just these organizations, but you all as well, so that you can be in the best position to do what Council Vice President Glass has noted. I know that our procurement officers and the contract monitors, were doing the best that they could, especially given the circumstances, under a great deal of stress in a myriad of different ways. But I think there are some lessons to be learned in how we operated the last couple of years, and may want to look at applying those moving forward. So I'm catching a little flat-footed here, but what are your thoughts and reactions to that?
Well, 100% support. I think that as you were talking, and as Councilmember Glass was talking about this, the idea of performance-based contracts is something that we have noodled around for probably 5 or 6 years as a way of giving people more flexibility about how they implement and get to the goals and outcomes we want, and less sort of minutia about who's being hired and what percentage of an FTE to get that work done. I care about the end goal at the end of the day of successfully serving the community. So there's an opportunity to have some of that conversation, and look forward to that. I know Vicki and our team that comprise the infrastructure and the back office work in the department, as well as our nonprofits, would welcome some developments that would lead to an easier way of contracting and doing work. So happy to have those conversations.
That'd be great. And then just one last point on this. One of the things that really came to bear was the nimbleness with which nonprofits that had especially very expertise in cultural diversity and an ability to communicate in the way that we can. So I think sort of underscoring and scoring some acknowledging that there are certain areas within a number of our communities that we just can't get to ourselves, I think is important. So there was a gentleman who testified last night. I found his testimony very compelling. He quit his job and started a communications company targeted to the Ethiopian community. And what got his business off the ground was he saw a news report on Channel 4 that a tornado was imminent. And so he tweeted that out in Amharic, and he got thousands of responses from people saying thank you. They would not have known that this had been an issue until that report had come out, and now he's starting a communications firm around this. So, an example of the extension of our nonprofits in so many ways. So, great. So, Ms. McGuire, does that make sense? 2 tranches, 2%, 2% added to the reconciliation, and then we'll follow up with the session in September to look at administrative capacity, both within HHS, but then among nonprofits as well.
Thank you. Yes, and just to be clear, we would apply that those 2 tranches across, again, all of the eligible contracts in other departments, not just HHS.
Correct.
Just to clarify that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Great.
So the next issue then is at the bottom of page 5, if you're following in the packet. For FY23, the county executive recommends shifting 40 grants totaling $2.1 million from the community grants NDA to the DHHS base budget. And again, this is a process that has been going on to clarify the role of certain grants as they evolve into the ongoing service base of the department. And as you referenced, also in relation to the new forthcoming grants office to again be in advance of that effort. So that is the recommendation, and council staff supports that. Again, the amount of that would adjust by in alignment with the conversation we just had.
I concur with the committee recommendation. I will note, though, I'm just kind of throwing this out there, not to be a wet blanket, but I think it makes the pros significantly outweigh the cons for a nonprofit to be in the base budget, as opposed to having to go year-over-year contracts. And I do actually appreciate the county executive working with HHS and moving in this direction, which I know the nonprofit sector has been asking for quite some time. It all makes perfect sense. But I'll note that if there is another recession, God forbid, and there will be, it's not a question of if, but when. This is in the base budget of HHS, and as difficult decisions have to be made with regards to reductions, I just want to make sure our partners understand that this does not wall them off from potentially having to have a reduction to those contracts. And the way we handled this in the recreation department, I'll just let folks know, there were only a handful of organizations that were in our base budget when I was at rec. And what we did was the corresponding cut to the rec department was the corresponding cut to the contracts of those respective organizations. And there was 1 year where that cut was 24%. So, it's a tough thing all the way around. But I just kind of wanted to note that to set expectations straight. Councilmember Rice.
Yeah, just very quickly, and I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. President. I would just say that again, I just really want to thank Dr. Kroll and the county executive staff for continuing to move in this direction. This has been something that we've been working on for over a decade. When I was first president in 2014, we were trying to work with the county executive in moving some items to the base budget and got a few moved in. But I remember that conversation happening back in 2012. So this is one in which I think is certainly a direction that is a positive one. We do understand, and by we, I think all the collectives being the advocates for making it happen, as well as the folks who are the recipients of these base budget funds, do understand some of the risk that's associated. But the hope is that, those times will be fewer and farther between, although they do happen, and we'll continue to build up a structure so that it becomes more resilient when these types of blips in our economy happen. And so from that perspective, I'm in full support, and just again, really want to thank Dr. Kroll, DHHS, and the county executive for their support in making that happen. So thank you.
Absolutely. And the strongest, there are many arguments for it, but another strong argument for it is it adds an air of predictability, which then puts you in a better position to leverage foundation funding and federal funding and state funding, which obviously raises all boats as well. So pros definitely outweigh the cons. Councilmember Vice President Glass.
You took the words out of my mouth. I support this effort, and there is an organization that I just recently spoke with throughout the budget process, and because of our new model of doing biannual grants, right? So they're good for 2 years. They've already leveraged that second year funding, knowing the predictability, knowing that it's coming, and have already planned for it. And I think that serves them and clearly will serve our residents and their clients better too. So I'm glad we've moved in this direction and absolutely support it.
Great. So without objection, Ms. McGuire, the committee goes with the staff recommendation here.
Thank you. The next issue in the packet does speak to the issue of the service consolidation hubs, and certainly this was one of the important service innovations during the pandemic, and really a successful way to carry a very wide range of services deep into community locations, increase residents' access, and really again leverage sort of multiple resources to bring services forward. This is one of the areas where I think we see a commitment again both to carry forward that emergency response effort and to transition and look to an ongoing and sustainable structure that will carry that forward again in an ongoing way through a variety of conditions. The executive's recommendation for FY23 does increase significantly the overall budget for the hubs. It increases total funding by $2 million from $3.6 million to $5.6 million. The FY23 recommended funding level consists of $2.6 million of new county dollars and $3 million in ARPA funding that was previously identified by the council to continue into FY23. So again, there's a significant $3 million of ARPA funding as well as a significant new county investment of the $2.6 million. The recommendation also from the executive does include a structure by which the hubs would really to strengthen that model and to base allocations according to use and experience criteria, service criteria, as well as to build some expectations into the contracts to both recognize the individual and community-based nature of the hubs, and also to have some consistent level of services across the hubs to again be sure that we're getting some of the pieces out to residents all across the county that we want to be supported. The department did provide significant amounts of data to support to show the experience of the hubs, the wide array of services, the volume and number of services, and there are allocation breakdowns on the bottom of page 6 of your packet that show the difference in recommended funding levels between FY22 and FY23 in a variety of categories, as well as specific to the hub funding by hub, which is on page 7 of your packet. Again, the executive does propose to implement a tiered funding approach that is based partly on the level of service and partly also on the geographic coverage of each hub. The council members have certainly heard advocacy also regarding the executive's proposed approach to the Oak Chapel hub. The executive's proposed approach was to not provide a dedicated hub amount of allocated funding to that location, but rather to continue to focus on the food services alone there as a primary service. The rationale that was provided there is again outlined in your packet, and I'm sure the executive branch can speak to it. I would just note, though, that during the council's FY22 ARPA conversation on Tuesday, the council did request that Mrs. Navarro's suggestion, and the council supported a request to allocate $300,000 of ARPA funding to support the Oak Chapel hub and to continue that hub funding there. So that would, again, we will certainly look at that and be sure that we can work through the additional details needed, but that recommendation would restore the FY22 allocation to Oak Chapel with ARPA funding, thereby, I believe, leaving alone the rest of the executive's recommendation for the remainder of the hub funding. Just one more comment, and then I will stop. totally lost my train of thought. I apologize.
No worries.
I will just stop right there.
I see my colleagues have their hands up. Before I get to them, Dr. Kroll, in addition to Oak Chapel, and we all agreed with Councilmember Navarro's assessment of the, and I know HHS agrees with that particular corridor needing and ensuring continuity of services. And I know there's well, I'll just say that I understand everybody agrees that there's a need, but I know that operations, there's always challenges. But let me just, in addition to Oak Chapel, we did receive testimony from at least two faith-based organizations during the budget process that expressed concern about them no longer receiving funds. They were not Oak Chapel, they were two other communities. And I know we've consolidated and have more of a sort of a regional approach, if you will, because it quite understandably, from HHS's perspective, the sustainability of continuing to support these really important and very wonderful efforts. There was some concern about the sustainability of that, and the consolidation made some sense because it could be leveraged with some other programs and supports. But could you talk a little bit now about the strategy that Ms. McGuire just enumerated, and from your own perspective, anything else you'd like to add that you think would be helpful? And then we're going to go to Council Vice President Glass, followed by Councilmember Rice.
Okay, thank you. This is the hubs. When we first conceived of those, they kind of spontaneously erupted as food service hubs, food service locations. And in conversation with Nancy, Councilmember Navarro, and I, we had this notion that consolidating, using those places as an opportunity to consolidate services and supports would make great sense, not just from a response to pandemic response, but as a way of projecting the county services and supports out into communities. The idea being that having local partners in regions who knew the community, who knew the other players, and who knew the other partners were in the county, in that part of the county, could pull them together and help to consolidate not just what was being delivered out of the doors of the hub, but could bring partners together to coordinate and make sure that there was connection to other resources locally. And beyond that, the expectation, I think, is that they would not just rely on county funds, but would figure out how they pooled and paired resources and how they identified other funds from which they could grow, so that the county's funding was a solid base on which they could build on. But there's an expectation that they would know their communities and know the resource needs of their communities and could go do that independent of having to come every year around the budget to look for something around the budget. In relation to the decision to shift funding from Oak Chapel, important to note that they will still be receiving food. They will receive something from the Food Security Task Force as that goes forward, so that the food portion of this should still be a service that they could provide. I looked at that the comment in the packet about the next closest hubs being 5 miles apart. But if you think about it, no one lives at Oak Chapel. So if you go out in a circle 2.5 miles around Oak Chapel, you're now 2.5 miles from additional hubs. So there's an opportunity to get to other hubs from those folks who are living in and around that area. The Oak Chapel site serves 20906, but Hughes actually sits dead square in 20906 and serves that community as well as Mid-County also serving the community. And the other piece of this is that in the recent reports, almost all of their service delivery is to people who are driving through, so that they're folks who are with cars or with vehicles who come, open their trunks or their doors and get food dropped in. So there's an opportunity for folks to just drive a little further in one direction or the other from where they may live to get that service. We would not do anything that put at risk people being able to have access to food. And I think that's an important piece of this for us. I think that's I'll stop there. I just think that we are in a position to try to make sure that the community is continuing to be fed, and that's represented in the budget, I think, and in the commitment to support the other hubs that are nearby, who will also do the consolidated work in a way that is compelling and supportive for the community.
Thank you. Council Vice President Glass, followed by Councilmember Rice.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Kroll, for that explanation and thinking regarding Oak Chapel. But I just want to take a step back and in evaluating all the different hubs and having visited, I believe, all of them I have over the last year and a half or so. What are the metrics, right? What are we viewing as success with regards to these partnerships and collaborations, as you mentioned, or the hope that they become partnerships and collaborations? But rather than providing, in this case, $300,000 or whatever each of the allocations might be, what are the expectations, right? And do the hubs know what their expectations are?
There we go. So thank you. It's a good question. One of the things that we have done is to talk about trying to generate some consistency in the hubs across the county, so the hubs are clear about what's expected of them and what the goals are. So some accountability for the work, some clear metrics around the work, some cost efficiency so that we're not wasting funding and ease of dependency on the county on food purchasing, boosting fundraising and partnerships, creating low barriers to food assistance, diapers, information, increases in case management and navigation, regional leadership to try to bring community partners together to help think about what collectively what the needs are in the county. When we talked about this 2 years ago, one of the challenges for us was really the idea that community partners knew what was going on in their communities. They could come together, talk about that, identify the resources that were already in place, collectively join in responding to the needs, and then figure out what else was needed, and then how we were going to get that, whether that's from the county or from other sources. And I think that's one of the long-term visions for what a hub could do for us, both in terms of their service, but also informing us about what we need to be thinking about as a department about what our future budget should look like and could look like in terms of support. I will add all seven of the 8 hubs that are in discussion have seen the draft recommendation. They've all seen the draft recommendation. 7 of them have signed off on that for this coming fiscal year. Oak Chapel is the only one that has not signed off on that, on the expectations for a hub going forward. And that would be one of the things that we would look for them to do if they were part of this continuing hub model. Our assumption, I'm sorry, and one last thing. Our assumption was never that. My initial assumption was that we'd have 5 hubs. But circumstances outstripped that, so we ended up with, at one point, I think as many as 9 different groups that were calling themselves hubs. Now we're trying to figure out how we focus this in a way that is regional, that meets the needs of the county, without having a hub every 2.5 miles. Because I think,
well, and over the last year and a half, I stopped counting how many different organizations and houses of worship said that they wanted to be a hub, right? And the altruism and the spirit to provide for the community is beautiful, and that's why we love our community here. But I really do appreciate you explaining a bit more what the expectation is, and quite frankly, the holistic approach to serving the community, which is what it sounds like. I'll say flat out, it is a little troubling that one of the hubs did not sign on to that expectation. And I agree with you that I would hope that they would sign on to that understanding if we are using scarce resources, because some of the funds that are going to Oak Chapel are funds that are coming from somewhere else as well. All good needs that need to be met here. But I would hope that they would sign on so that they could position themselves to be funded into the future, right? And again, that's the expectation here, that we want to help grow them. We want them to mature. We want them to be holistic in their approach so that we can continue relying on them in this way. And so I'll end there, but I appreciate you expanding a little bit about the thought process.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And first and foremost, Dr. Kroll, thank you so much for your continued support of hubs across this county. I remember when the pandemic first hit and many of the numerous calls that all of us had, including the council chair, the chair and council president and council vice president, we've all been on them talking about food insecurity since the very beginning. In fact, it was one of the very first special appropriations we made was surrounding food insecurity. And so these hubs have certainly been at the center of not only our ability to weather the storm of the pandemic, but also as we come out of some of the darkest days of the pandemic. And so with that being said, I applaud the continued support for the hubs. My question is that understanding that we still have not seen our food insecurity numbers go down. As we look at MANA, as we look at KIND, as we look at Capital Area Food Bank, that continue to have draws on them for food support, while I appreciate what the county executive has done in terms of this allocation of a $4 million for food, I'm not clear as to how that relates to the hubs and whether or not they might be able to utilize that money to offset their costs, because then that certainly would be commensurate with my understanding of what it is that we'd want to do in terms of providing additional support for our hubs across the board, right? So for each of them, in being able to draw down on those funds to be able to utilize to help to deal with the rising cost of food that continues to be there and the increased demand for food. And so I'm just curious as to whether or not that's been a thought process in terms of thinking of how these funds might be utilized. And if not, what are we thinking about in terms of those two things, both the continued and somehow increased need when it comes to the food itself and also the increase in the price of food?
So a couple of things. We are obviously the Capital Area Food Bank, our food security task force, and the department, of course, folks in the department are very mindful of the fact that there seems to be less food and less funding for food and less opportunity for food going around, while the need is still great. Setting aside the conversation about the hubs as an entity that has a mission that is beyond food to do some other things, and focusing more on the food pieces, I would say that Oak Chapel and other providers are eligible to receive food and funding or funding for food through the Food Security Task Force and through the Office of Food Sufficiency. I think I mispronounced that. I misstated that. Once it's established, the new Office for Food Sufficiency. But that is, it is an ongoing concern. I think, like you, and everyone else, I was surprised to see the level of food need that still exists in the county. I suspect when we look at unemployment and dissect unemployment, what we see is that there are some strata. Overall, we're doing fine in terms of unemployment, but when you start digging down into specific job classes and categories, you find that the levels of unemployment start to diverge from what our county norm looks like, and that we have people who have still not gotten back to work and not gotten themselves back on the sound financial footing, so the need continues. And I think that whatever we're doing with food, this issue of economic survival and self-sufficiency is underpinning that demand, and we've got to go upstream a little bit and figure out how we address that.
Ms. McGuire, you say something? Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, and I apologize. I think this is what I was going to say when I lost my train of thought, that the numbers and the allocations that we were discussing for the hubs do not include the food insecurity.
That's right.
Dollars. And those actually, we do have them separated into the next section. But again, those dollars for the hub allocations are for, as Dr. Kroll was saying, these other services, the co-located services, case management. There are a number of other pieces, as obviously you well know, but the food dollars themselves are not included in those totals.
And so do we know how much each hub would get when it comes to food allocations as a part of that $4 million?
I don't believe we do. Again, I think that's certainly a question that the committee may want more information about from the department.
Yeah, and the only reason why I'm asking, and again, Dr. Kroll, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, because this is an ongoing conversation and maybe something that we may want to come back to, because it surrounds the conversation around Oak Chapel, and it surrounds the conversation around areas like Black Rock that I know well. It's the first hub that existed and certainly having that flat funding, understanding that there is tremendous need. I mean, we just looked at our nonprofits and said we were going to extend from, possibly 6% to 10% increase, and reflecting, understanding staffing costs, all other kinds of things as well. The same thing applies to our hubs too, right? And so from that standpoint, I think that it really is important for us when it comes to these to factor that in to what it is that we're doing in terms of support. I see that we've got some of the hubs that have increased, which I completely support, namely Hughes, Interfaith, and Clifton. Clifton has increased by 30% in terms of their percentage of FY22 approved versus recommended. And I'm not trying to take anything away from those entities, but would certainly want to understand a little bit more about why we kept in some of the most effective in terms of outreach hubs flat, while others had significant increases. And so if we can come back to this, Mr. Chair, that would be great, so that we could get some of these answers and just understand a little bit more around the strategy. I think that, again, there's still questions around Oak Chapel. And while we've moved forward in terms of supporting us in a mechanism of how to move forward, I think that if we can get more specific about what it is exactly that we're doing with Oak Chapel, I think that would be great too. Again, I know it because I lived less than a mile from it. And so while I do understand, Dr. Kroll, in terms of what you're saying about it not being directly where, I mean, from all of the Belpre apartments that are right next to Plaza del Mercado, those are all within walking distance and a bicycle distance. I know I used to bike from my neighborhood on Post Lane in Lake Hill Village to Plaza del Mercado every day as I went to work at the McDonald's there. So again, from an access perspective, that place is certainly accessible via walking or via taking a bike. It's only a 15-minute walk from my house, my old house, to that area. And so I know from those Belpre apartments that are all lower income and some, I guess, moderate income areas to that vicinity is just a short distance. And so it really is something where I think strategically we just maybe need to talk a little bit more about that. I support it in terms of consolidation. And while I understand where the Glenmont, where Hughes is also, like I said, I'm born and raised in that area, but it is one in which I just think we need to give it a little bit more thought and talk a little bit more strategy around what it is that we want to see, and also what we want to do in terms of addressing some of the concerns that we have regarding the affordability of food, availability of food, all those kinds of things that I think play an integral role in terms of us responding to the need in our community. So just wanted to put that out there as a thought.
Happy to take a deeper dive with it on it with you. I would say that and understand what you're saying about the Oak Chapel hub in Belpre, and yet their volume is almost entirely car-based volume. So people are not necessarily walking up in any kind of great numbers, and 40% of them seem to be coming from elsewhere outside of 90206, in fact. And I think that is probably something that is reflected across multiple hubs. So there's a reality of where they sit and the reality of who's using them at this point that I think factors into our thinking about this.
And that's why I think, again, and I agree with you, which is why strategically we may want to think about how it is that we're marketing them, especially to those communities that we know are surrounding, and ensuring that those are the folks, because those are the folks I know. When I look at Pepper Tree Farms, right, that's right on Belpre, I know that neighborhood. I know I went to school with kids that went to Belpre Elementary, and so I know the economics of that area. And so that would certainly benefit from, and again, it's walking distance. It's maybe 1.2 miles, maybe from Pepper Tree Farms to there. But again, to walk a mile to get some food, I can assure you that folks, if they knew and understood what was there, a lot of families would take advantage of that. So again, just strategically, we just may want to take a step back for a second and talk about how it is that we do this, encouraging those that can use cars to maybe use the Hughes site, and then doing this one solely for walk up or for, walk in or whatever the case may be. I mean, so again, being strategic about this, I think would help us. to really meet more of the need that we know is out there. And I appreciate, again, everything that you've done. You guys are doing a phenomenal job in terms of stepping up in the response. It's just that I think we can probably do a little bit more with more investment and some even more sort of focused and targeted strategy of who it is that we're marketing some of this to. So just get my thoughts.
I certainly agree with everything you and Council Vice President Glass said. I just add a couple of things. So Mark Hodge did a really great job on the fly, kind of, working on coordinating efforts. And so I think it's very smart for the administration to acknowledge the need to coordinate efforts permanently. And so the Food Resiliency Office, I think, is going to go a long way in helping with that and putting every organization in a better position to leverage information and funds. Because many of these families, quite understandably, I'd be doing the same thing, we're going to multiple hubs, but there was no necessarily communication among to figure out how best to serve these families beyond just the delivery of the life-saving, things they were trying to secure, things as basic as food and diapers. But I'll note also that, and I know Heather Breskin has talked about this, Jackie DiCarlo has talked about this, which is so smart. We're thinking about how to deliver these resources in a more dignified way rather than having to wait in line during inclement weather.
Yes.
Especially in this notion of these co-op markets, where that provide families with options that are culturally appropriate, a much more dignified way of being able to secure the resources that you need for your respective family, and also make it a little bit more efficient for us to invest more time and energy in working with these families. So these are, I know, all being discussed and part of a broader multi-year strategy that we are working on now, but it's connected to the hub model, which has been a lifeline and organically will evolve and already is starting to. So, but to our friends that are out there that are not securing the resources that they had before, I think we'll follow up with Councilmember Rice's point again, post-budget, catch our breath, and reevaluate where we go from here. But I have every degree of confidence that HHS knows, sees, acknowledges the great work that's being done. And over time, I think we're going to be in a better position to be able to help support that work. So I don't believe there's anything here for us to specifically on this line item anyways. Was there anything, Ms. McGuire, that we had to vote on or support?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Rice.
Yeah, no. So if I understand you, and one of the things I think, because what I think will be important is similar and akin to what we did before. If we determine based on our analysis that we may need to do some sort of supplemental based on whatever it is that our analysis is, then we can do that at that time. I'm in support of that. So we don't have to do it necessarily in the context of budget for right now. But I do want to just make sure that we signal to those that are out there that are looking for additional support that just because we're not putting it in the budget today or on the reconciliation list does not mean that we're just saying that we don't recognize that there is additional need for additional revenue potentially in terms of how we structure how it is we're going to respond to this. And so I think as quickly as we can, coming back to this after budget, to make sure that if there are recommendations that are required that suggest that we need to have additional revenue for potential sites. And I think your idea is great. I just want to say again that, seeing what we saw in East County in terms of what MANA stood up with it being more of that dignified experience, maybe setting something like that up with Oak Chapel. We can be creative in terms of that all of our hubs don't have to look the same. And we can certainly make it so that there are a myriad of options that are available for folks. If you have a car and you just need a drive-in for a generic set of produce, go to here. If you need something more specific that's culturally appropriate, you need to go in, you go to this one, right? So there could be a multitude of options that are there based on what it is that we're doing. And so I just want to echo that, but just be very clear as we're signaling to those that I'm sure are watching us about what it is that we're going to be doing. in terms of our continued support for these hubs that have stood up and done so much. And I would just like to say this, we have done, and Dr. Kroll, you pointed this out, we focus so much on food, which is a big part, right? But there are so many of these other things in terms of just putting people in touch with services that will continue to need to exist. When I look at signing kids up for next year and how that marketing has already been underway, you guys have been doing an awesome job. Let me just tell you, seriously, in terms of promoting and highlighting that. And the MCPS has been doing a great job in terms of marketing and promoting about getting kids signed up for pre-K and Head Start. And so this is exactly what we want to have as a part of what our hubs do, so much across the board that we know that many of our marginalized in our community are disconnected from. And so because of that, and because we're asking them to do more, we're going to need to be commensurate with the types of support that we give them to help support that more. And so that's what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Chair. And so I just wanted to make sure that that's what we were making sure that our folks at home heard as well. So,
if I could just jump in real quick, Dr. Kroll, again, I appreciate the thoughtfulness in which we're having this conversation, right, in order to help the hubs, to help the collaborative nature that is required, as Councilmember Rice just said, and has been discussed. Is there, do we have a map of, kind of the outreach or the radii that you were alluding to with regard to the reach of each of these hubs and maybe what their impact is, something to visualize that impact?
I don't know if we have it in this moment, but I do know that we have sufficient data around this. Vicki, were you trying to jump in?
Actually, I'm sorry, Dr. Kroll. I just wanted to mention that DHS did provide some material that's at the back of your packet. It's towards the end, and I can look at what page the map is on. Now, it is a visual map, as you mentioned, Mr. Glass. It does not, there may be additional, it's on, I'm sorry, Circle 45. There may be additional information that you're interested in terms of, perhaps numbers or outreach or attendance that I think you're also getting at. But I just wanted to point out there is a visual map in the packet.
Got it.
There is a visual network, and we can a map. But I think the question then is the radius of reach for the hubs, and I think I don't know that map actually portrays that, but so that may be a piece you're asking for.
I got it. So I see Circle 45. It's page 64 in the PDF. So 64 out of 72. So it is near the back. I appreciate Ms. McGuire for pointing that out. And the only reason I just wanted to ask about that is because, again, as we talk about this conceptually, I think what I think is most important is serving the people in these communities. The hub itself, the geographic location, is nothing more than a piece of property in which the services and the food are physically on. And we can't let a physical property inhibit us from providing the services to those residents nearby. That's what we're all trying to get at. And so long as we keep setting the expectations for these organizations and whomever might be managing these properties, they will be better served, but we need them to better themselves in some respect, so that we can continue this collaboration, right? Because there's so much need, and we have been saying no to organizations that want to offer these services, and no doubt they would provide them beautifully, but where we see need for improvement, room for improvement, we have to encourage it. I think
that's right. I think that the part of the conversation that we've engaged in around consolidating and how we arrange and fund things is to make sure that we are covering the places where there is no need, where there is need, and to make sure that there is adequate, that we're doing the best job we can of making sure that happens. So, yeah.
Thank you. No, good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Ms. McGuire, back to you.
Thank you. I'll just confirm briefly that the committee then is supporting the executive's budget at this time, with the expectation that we come back quickly in the context of the broader food discussions and generally the hub model and approach, that we come back to that quickly and address any follow-up needs that are necessary. I think that's a good segue to the next item, which does deal specifically with food insecurity, and I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Naeem Mia, who is lead for the Food Security Task Force.
Okay. Thank you, Bessie. There are three issues here related to food security. First, as we already kind of touched upon, is executive is recommending $4 million of one-time funding in the HHS budget to fund food purchases. There's some history in the packet on what the council has already approved. It's been close to over $33 million over the last 2 years since the pandemic began to fund food assistance efforts. Large part of that funding has gone towards direct food purchases, but a significant portion has also gone towards infrastructure improvements and investment, things like food security grants to local farmers, to local restaurants, senior nutrition programs, as well as obtaining contractor support to beef up the food access call center and other types of IT investments as well. That $33 million comes out to about $15 million per average per year. So $4 million is especially at the current inflation, is not going to cover the full year amount. And so it will provide some runway into the early next fiscal year. And then I think, as has been current practice, the Food Security Task Force and HHS will likely evaluate supplemental appropriations to continue funding food assistance as needed. But that $4 million is currently is included for now as an initial funding effort. The second issue here is, of course, the new Office of Food System Resiliency. This, again, is the executives proposing $1.06 million in next year's budget to fund this new office. It will largely supplant the Food Security Task Force, which is made up of members from HHS, Emergency Management and Homeland Security, as well as contractors. The $1 million includes 3 positions, as well as grant funding and some contractual funding to the Montgomery County Food Council. The executive is recommending $1 million in the community engagement cluster budget. We're discussing it here in HHS committee and HHS budget because of the close nexus that the office will have with HHS. Tomorrow, the CEC budget will be taken up at GO committee, and we'll have a discussion there as well. From a budget presentation standpoint, it makes sense to include this in HHS's FY23 budget. From a practical standpoint, the executive is expected to send legislation over that will actually create the office from a legal and structural standpoint this summer, and that is legislation the council will review and weigh in on. So for now, the $1 million is simply it's a commitment by the executive towards this office, but the actual setting up of the office will occur this summer, and by next year we will have early next fiscal year we'll have the resources and the positions are expected to be in place by that point in time. Okay, and then I'll stop right there.
Just a couple of thoughts here. I just want to acknowledge how important this is and how appreciative I am that this has been set up. I think it was a best practice, the coordination between the executive branch working with the Food Council and all of the respective organizations, both the ones that were already members of the Food Council and the ones that emerged during the pandemic. And it was clear that that type of synergy and organization is really important to be able to share information on the ground that can be helpful, and to be able to provide, as Council Vice President Glass noted earlier, sort of this broader picture that's in the packet, but moving forward will be even more helpful in figuring out where the holes are and where we need to make sure that the system is as tight as possible. So that is really important. Council Vice President Glass.
Thank you. So I see that this office is to supersede the Food Security Task Force. So can someone talk a little bit about the interplay between the Food Security Task Force and the Food Council and the work that is being done here within this sector?
Sure. So the task force includes members from HHS, as well as Ms. Heather Ruskin from the Food Council and her staff. It also includes representatives and participants from MCPS and other nonprofit providers. And it's really it's a task force that helps open communication and coordination among the different parts of the food security ecosystem in the county. And so a lot of these task force members on the county side especially have full-time jobs, and they've been ad hoc assigned to the task force to support its efforts. The new office will hire new positions to be dedicated to these efforts and to provide long-term, permanent strategic support and coordination communication. So it's just providing a more strategic, permanent resources.
So actual dedicated staff who aren't multitasking all these different things, but then the Food Council itself will still be the convening organization within the nonprofit space and the agricultural space. But then it's this food system, the Office of Food System Resilience, that will then provide the directives and the money. Is that so? So I just understand the org chart here.
Yes, Dr. Kroll, you can explain further.
Actually, I was going to ask Vicki Buckland to jump in and explain. She's been a lot closer to it.
Awesome.
Yeah, although not as close as some others, so I will do my best. So the footprint of HHS within the food world is traditionally somewhat niche, and so for the Food Security Task Force, the Heather Bruskin and that organization have played a very pivotal role, because the larger food picture is larger than HHS, and it does involve a lot of different organizations across the county, and touches on different topics that are not necessarily in HHS's wheelhouse. So the new Office of Food Resilience has a larger vision in it than HHS. HHS, obviously, during the pandemic, there are a whole bunch of things that we ended up taking on and participating in because they needed to be done. And,
exactly.
That's part of what we do, right? But moving forward, that effort resembles more the kind of community networking and larger coordination that the community engagement cluster engages in. And so as this temporary home, while the Office of Food Resiliency is being set up, having it within the community engagement cluster starts to scope it more appropriately than the more limited role that HHS traditionally plays in this space. So that was the logic around that.
So one other thing to add around that is just that it gives the food community a focal point in county government that it has never had before, and a chance to really begin to coordinate in a meaningful way. Because it's not only not in our wheelhouse, it's one of 1,000 things we've got in our wheelhouse, and we've been Mikey through much of this pandemic, and so having an office that is focused on this issue is important, in that it gives the food community a place to go, but it also helps to address some of the cultural issues that we discovered and had to deal with on the fly throughout this process. Who gets what food? How do we do this differentially across the different communities that we have? So it gives it a strong foundation on which to build, I think.
Appreciate you all elaborating. The question was not so much questioning the need for the office, but really just figuring out the org chart of how it transitions from what it currently is to what it needs to be. But you've given me a deeper dive, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thanks. So I think back to 2016 when then Chair Leventhal and Councilmember Berliner and I, members of the HHS committee, passed Bill 1916, which established the strategic plan to end food insecurity in Montgomery County. And it required every year for us to give a report. It convened on what we're doing to combat food insecurity. It involved DHHS, obviously, as well as MCPS and other players, Office of Community Partnerships, MANA, Capital Area Food Bank, all coming together to talk about what it is that we're talking about right now. In fact, it included the Office of Ag and the Department of Transportation as well. So I'm curious as to how this all kind of combines together in those kinds of efforts. And so it seems to me as though the Food Council, and it kind of goes along with what Councilmember Glass was saying, Councilmember Vice President Glass was saying, but I'm just trying to understand who's responsible. Who is the one who is now going to be the lead in terms of saying, this is the direction moving forward. This is our strategic, initiatives, and this is what we think is going to help us to do what we passed back in 2016, which is end food insecurity in the county. So who's the one that's responsible? Is this now going to be a separate entity, this Office of Food Resilience? Are they the ones that are now responsible? And that responsibility is now shifting from what would have been DHHS, even though it was niche, and I agree. But that's basically where it was housed. It was under DHHS. So now, is this entity responsible? And so are then they going to have the true resources and power necessary to kind of make these kinds of things happen? Because DHHS, as one of the largest departments in county government, wields a very large sword. But an entity that involves 3 people is not the same. And so I just want to make sure that we're not setting this organization up for failure in the sense of not being able to, use that same sort of convening power that DHHS has.
So, I see Vicki back on, and she can jump in on this one. But I would say that my operating assumption around the food system, Office of Food System Resilience, is that they become a partner to the Food Security Task Force, to the Food Capillary Food Bank, and if you think about it as part of the legs and the brain trust to figure out how we manage food sufficiency in this county, if you think about where we were for the last 2 years, we have been in the business of where do we find food and how do we get it in front of people. And from a health perspective, HHS is trying to make sure that folks have enough have nutritious meals and have them when they need them. But this group, as I think about it, has to think about who's growing the food, how does it get to market, who's bringing it, who's dedicating it, how do we make sure we're getting the right kinds of things at the table, and all the way down to distribution routes, and who's at the and how that's happening. So it's a much bigger job. It's a focused opportunity for a group in the county to help coordinate that, I think, in a way that has not happened before. And I do, it's a starting point. The 1.06 and the staff is a starting point of this. But what it does is that it leverages county government and brings county government to the table in a way that it hasn't been around this. And I think that's does it grow beyond that? I think is a question for us. It's a starting point. My hunch is that the Food Security Task Force and MANA and the Food Council folks would probably say, yeah, we probably need some additional work. But this year gets us started and lets them do some work around planning and thinking and framing out how this work is going to proceed in the future.
And the part that I will add was a reference earlier to legislation that will be coming over to council, and some of those questions that you have raised, I think that's part of that discussion around the legislation around the office.
Thank you, Vicki. I appreciate that, and thank you, Dr. Kroll. Mr. Chair and Ms. McGuire, you haven't said about MANA yet, or Mr. Mia, I'm sorry, was the one. Have we touched on MANA yet, or?
It's still coming.
Okay, all right, I'll wait on that then. Thank you, Mr. Chair, appreciate it.
Thanks, and yeah, those are great questions, great line of thinking. And I think the intent for this office is to help working collaboratively with the Food Council in a true partnership and an authentic alliance is really create a system, that is cohesive, talks to each other, and is transparent, and also will outlive all of us, hopefully. So that the work can keep going regardless of who the leadership is at the time. But those are good points. Okay, let's go move on, Ms. McGuire, or Mr. Mia.
Sure. I just want to note with regard to the food office, the staff recommendation was to move it to HHS budget. But again, I'm hearing that CEC might be okay as well. And staff is agnostic because we know that in a few months legislation will come forward and we'll be moving the funds to that new office once it's created. So Again, staff recommendations to move with HHS, but we're open to revising that recommendation.
Yeah, I think keeping it where it is probably makes sense rather than going back and forth. Dr. Kroll, do you agree?
I'm agnostic on it. I think there's some reason to move it to CEC so that they can begin to think about the work that I outlined earlier in terms of the cultural issues. They have a deeper reach in the community in some respects and a more focused reach. But I think we would agree that we're fine with it staying where it is. It's a lot simpler operationally, I think, to move it once than to move it twice.
Okay.
With regards to the Manna Food Center, they've requested $1 million in total funding in FY23. You'll see in the packet on page 10, right in the middle of the section, you'll see what the breakdown of that $1 million is requesting for. It includes $330,000 for some facilities costs, such as covering facilities maintenance and rent, $295,000 for staff retention, training, compensation, $230,000 for direct food purchases, and $95,000 for vehicles for delivery, as well as $50,000 for technology upgrades and enhancements. This funding request was not included in the executive's recommended budget. It is before the committee to consider. You'll see their request letter has more detail. It's on the back end of the packet. Staff is not making a specific recommendation to include or not include, but it's here for discussion with the committee.
Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Look, back in March 24th of 2020, our special appropriation to Manna Food, Manna's been at the forefront when it comes to this. And again, they've been such great stewards when it comes to managing effectively, not overspending, really doing what needs to be done. We heard the public hearing testimony from one of the folks from Manna last night. And so with that respect, I really would like to see us add this onto the reconciliation list. So that would be my motion.
Council Vice President. Yep. Second. I totally agree. I was thinking about this. It's going to be a long budget process. Maybe we use this as leverage to make sure we write into the contract, Mr. Carlo's got to stay as long as she's willing to. I'm kidding. She's going to stay as long as she would like, but her leadership has just been so outstanding for so many years. She's such a tremendous asset in our community. And of course, Manna Foods is, as well as is their board and their staff. Great testimony yesterday from Manna. Really appreciated that. So this makes sense and is in line with what we had done before. So we'll add that to the reconciliation list.
To be clear, the just 1 million as one piece, just to clarify. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so thank you. I think that concludes our discussion of the food funding, because we're also hearing support for the 4 million. Again, understanding that there is a great deal to come back to, both with the hubs and the food in terms of ongoing discussions as these structures develop. Anything? I just wanted to pause before, be sure people are really finished with food.
I think I'm getting hungry.
Mr. Chair,
Councilmember Rice.
I'm very, very sorry, but I just want to make sure that, look, by us putting this on the reconciliation list, I think that, again, as we talk about some of these things and talk about some of the strategies, and especially when it comes to food and these other kinds of things and what can be used for what, I saw that $230,000 of this is for food purchases. And so I do really want to understand. I also understand that we're looking at nonprofits, of which Manna is a part. And so will they receive an increase as a result of that? Would that be the 6%? Would it be 8%? Would it be 10%? Whatever that does needs to be kind of encompassed in that. So I would just say that, with the caveat that, obviously we don't need to double dip. I'm not saying Manna's trying to double dip, but we don't need to double dip if not necessary from that perspective. So if they are going to be able to draw down an additional $230,000 from that $4 million fund, then, we leave that, and then the request becomes a little bit less, right? Then it becomes $770. And so from that standpoint, I think there may be some adjustments. And so I'd just like to ask staff to help us to understand better what that true number is that we're looking at. That would help them to accomplish what it is that they're trying to achieve, which is better service, more service for our constituencies, but at the same time, being mindful of the fiscal constraints that we're under and the fiscal support that we're looking to give nonprofits across the county. Does that make sense, Ms. McGuire?
Yes, thank you. No, it does. Sorry, I was listening and taking notes. Yes.
No. I just want to, and for Council Vice President Glass, who seconded, does that? Okay. All right.
So I think that what I'm hearing then is that so again, we would reconvene with the department as well as with MANA to further understand and refine this request in light of the other dynamics in the budget. And I think some of that would require then some greater understanding around the $4 million, which I believe I also heard the committee discussing earlier in our conversation.
Exactly. And we're coming back, right, Mr. Chair?
Coming back and with a little bit more specificity on how the 4 million will be broken down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you, sir.
So we will look to one of the follow-up work sessions to bring back the specific issues related to how that 4 million will be allocated, its impact on this recommendation. Some of the larger structural issues would still wait regarding hubs and the planning and clearly the legislation would wait until after budget. Is that accurate? Okay.
Accurate.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Okay, then I'll move us along then to the top of page 11 in your packet, which is to talk about information technology. There is a fairly sizable request for funding to improve technology systems in DHHS in the FY23 budget. Altogether, it's just over $2 million. It is for a couple of different components. And while certainly that's a lot to look at, especially in the current environment and the services that we're talking about, I would emphasize that this really does relate to the core mission in that the technology is needed to support, again, the core mission and the core services that DHHS provides. There are a couple of key systems, but one of them is the Enterprise Integrated Case Management System, which is at the end of its life. And to borrow a phrase from our friends at Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions, approaching end of support, where one can't even get the kind of support to patch or deal with any problems that may come to the system. And so again, just want to emphasize the criticality of these systems and that this is in fact a major core mission request. Coming back again, we do have some colleagues of ours from the county TEBS department, which I hope I'm saying the name correctly, is Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions. And my understanding is that TEBS staff have worked closely with DHHS staff, both to sort of assess the risk of the DHHS systems, and then to help craft the solutions and the budget recommendation that you have here. Just briefly, again, there are the two largest components of this request do relate again to the Enterprise Integrated Case Management System that I was referencing, which does a great deal of the integrated business of DHHS, supports a number of the payment programs that are required. There's also an application for online licensing, which is something that our community who participates in the licensing inspections, I think, is very eager to see. And the smallest amount, doesn't make it less important, is an amount to upgrade the phone system at the crisis center to meet some very specific needs there. So those are the four elements. Again, together, they're just over 2 million. Certainly, we have staff from DHHS here, as well as I said, colleagues from TEBS who can speak to any specific questions about this request. Council staff clearly does support the request.
I think without objection. Oh, Councilmember Rice.
Just very quickly, again, hearing from folks at our public hearing who testified, talking about the synergy between communication, between different modalities of their interaction with government and how that would be important. I know that that's always been something that DHHS has worked towards. And so I'm hopeful that these upgrades in terms of service and software will help to facilitate even more of that commingling of information. I know that there are certain restrictions, but beyond that, especially when it comes to hubs and then getting that initial information and being able to then share that with Health and Human Services. So when they go and apply at a different place, they don't have to do all of the forms that they did at the other one. Those kinds of stories, like we heard from the public testimony at the public hearing, I think is incredibly important. And so that's why I think this is great. It aligns directly with what we heard from our public in terms of their concerns. So just want to thank everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good point. So without objection, then, Ms. McGuire, we go with the staff recommendation.
Thank you. So on pages 12 and 13 are just listed for your reference a number of items that council staff has classified as consent. They're smaller items. There are notes here describing them. Just again, some of the smaller additions within the administration area, as well as some of the not always small but consistent adjustments to the department as a whole related to compensation increases from the prior year, printing and mail, and some other, again, centrally identified items. So those are there just in case anyone wanted to ask a question or discuss them. Otherwise, council staff recommends approval of those as well.
See no comments from colleagues. I don't have one either, so without objection.
Thank you. That would take us into Aging and Disability Services. So Aging and Disability Services, again, is a service area that does increase by about $5.2 million in the executive's recommendation and about 8 FTE. I did want to highlight before we get into the issues, one background issue that does impact the first couple of pieces of discussion, and that just to provide a little bit of context information on the county minimum wage. Certainly, as council members are well aware, Bill 2817 in November of 2017 did require incremental increases to the minimum wage. And certainly this is important when we're talking in the context of the Department of Health and Human Services and other departments as well, to some of our community providers that again then impacts their wage structure and is particularly relevant when we talk about providers who are also receiving state reimbursement, because often that state reimbursement does not take into account a higher wage requirement as there is in Montgomery County. And so again, just wanted to provide on page 13 there some of that context information about the current minimum wage and the amount for the upcoming year that has been specified by the Chief Administrative Officer. On the top of page 14, I'm sorry, was there? On the top of page 14, then, the first issue to discuss here relates to the supplement for developmental disability service providers. The county has had a long-standing policy of providing a locally funded supplement to support organizations providing direct services to the developmentally disabled community in the county. The criteria for determining the amount of the supplement has varied greatly over the years. But the county supplement has increased steadily in total amount, with, of course, a couple of exceptions in recent pandemic years. The supplement, again, does reduce the gap between what the reimbursement that providers receive and the actual cost of providing services in the county, as we were discussing. One factor is, of course, the minimum wage. The good news is that for FY23, the executive recommends an increase of $1.128 million in the DD supplement, which does bring the supplement amount total to just over $20 million, $20.3 million, and that is the full amount requested by our Interact BD collaborative group representing providers in Montgomery County. So the good news is that is fully funded in the executive's budget. The executive also does recommend an additional position to support this program implementation. Certainly, as the size of the program grows, that of course leads to an increase in workload also, and some of the complexity around administering the supplement. Due to some of the variations in rate setting that the state is going through currently, the Interact group and DHHS have worked together to identify a new methodology for distributing the supplement that does take into account some of, again, the variances in rate experiences that the providers are experiencing. DHHS, again, Interact and council staff all support the new methodology. Language for the budget provision is provided in your packet just as context. We would certainly update that to reflect the current amount and methodology, but essentially The requirement does, of course, require that organizations are compliant with the county's minimum wage law and work with the HHS to provide any documentation requested. This is a group of providers that we've had, again, longstanding and very positive working relationships with. We appreciate the collaboration with them as a group and individually. I know DHHS does as well, and so council staff, of course, does support both the recommended increase and the additional position. One final note, we also are going to continue work that had started. Of course, many things got derailed in the last couple of years, but we have resumed conversations around continuing to try to work with the state to be able to leverage Medicaid and bring some additional resources to bear on the situation through that resource.
I'll just say a couple of things here. You know, obviously this work is so critical, and I know that these organizations have really struggled, like so many others, but in particular in this area on recruitment and retention of these angels. I mean, what these people do on the front lines and providing support for these constituents and families is truly remarkable. So I appreciate DHHS's efforts to work with our community-based organizations, and I completely concur with us needing to take back up addressing the structural issues that we can't solve on our own, that we really do need the state's help with. And, you know, there will be a transition in leadership come November, and that will present an opportunity for us to engage with whomever the new administration is. And let's get in early and have this conversation. I know members of the General Assembly have taken up this issue and have been working closely on it. And I think there's a lot of political will to tackle a longstanding issue that's caused a lot of consternation and frustration in the DD community. So let's see what we can do to move this along. Dr. Brunetto, did you want to add anything?
Thank you so much, everyone. Good afternoon, Councilmember Alvarez, Councilmember Rice, and Councilmember Glass. We just thank you for your support throughout the pandemic for the DD providers. And as you stated, the collaboration has been really remarkable, and clearly the staff of those nonprofit agencies have been absolutely outstanding. But every time I have an interaction with any of our DD providers, they continue to say how much they appreciate the focus in our particular county on the population they serve. They do not have that kind of collaboration and cooperation anywhere else in the state of Maryland. So they are truly very, very appreciative of all of the support you have provided over the years, and clearly again, hopefully this year.
Great. So without objection, we support the committee or the staff recommendation.
Thank you. So our next issue is also a good news piece of issue here. There's a similar supplement need for providers who provide adult medical daycare services, again, to seniors who are medically compromised and adults with disabilities in the community who do not necessarily need 24-hour-a-day or residential care, but cannot live independently and often need, again, assistance with services and programming during the day. These providers, again, have the county began providing supplemental supplemental funding to these service providers in FY19. There has been some ongoing discussion around the appropriate level of support for this group, again, similarly with cost issues and a gap between actual cost of providing services in Montgomery County, partly due to wages and the reimbursement from the state. The advocacy group that works with these providers, that is the coalition of these providers, I'm forgetting their name and I apologize for that, but that advocacy group did provide a great deal of backup and supporting information on the dollars that are being requested. That is in the back of your packet. And again, the executive has fully funded the request to increase the supplement to the requested level, which does, again, bridge that gap that's been identified between the reimbursement level and the cost of providing services. Certainly, this is also a service area where there are additional compounding factors. At this point in time, this is a welcome addition and a welcome step in the right direction for this year, and that is recommended for FY23. The total amount would add $1.4 million to the base and bring it to just over $2.1 million for FY23 in total.
I just want to express my appreciation to the executive branch on this as well. This is, I think we're all on the record supporting our adult medical day programs. I feel very bullish about this initiative because I think, I've shared my personal story with my grandparents, and this would have been a really great option for them, as my mom was the primary caretaker. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, my grandfather had Parkinson's. And I think a lot more families are going to turn to this option and the culturally appropriate manner in which they deliver their services and provide some really high quality programs and peace of mind for everyone involved is extraordinary. So this is a welcome addition to the budget, fully support it. I suspect my colleagues do as well. So yes, without objection.
Thank you. So that recommendation is for the FY23 funding amount. There is actually also an FY22 funding request that is before you today as well. This actually relates to ARPA funding that had been identified for these providers in FY22. It's a total amount of $1.2 million in ARPA funding. And the reason it's coming to you now is because there were a number of logistics to work out regarding the mechanisms for distributing this funding, methodology, and again, just a number of logistics. Finance, HHS, again, the providers and council staff have all worked together and have agreed on a methodology. That methodology is laid out in your packet on Circle 17. And so if the committee supports moving this forward, again, it's a total of $1.2 million to ARPA funding, to these providers. It does include a small amount for GHHS to have some broker assistance to help administer it. If the committee approves this, council staff will work right away to put a resolution forward for introduction at your next meeting and move it forward.
I think without objection.
Okay, thank you. So the final substantive issue, major issue in aging and disability services does relate to adult protective services. Adult protective services are mandated services that do not allow wait lists, have legally mandated response times, and have also seen significant increases in cases in recent years. HHS provided a significant amount of information that again is in the attachments to your packet, really detailing the impact that the overall increase to the senior population as part of the growing population in Montgomery County, as well as the impacts of the pandemic, some potentially pent up cases that may be coming forward. Family members are able to see their family members in ways that they weren't always able to during the pandemic. All of these factors together have created an increase in some cases, both in this area and in others, and there are some increases in the budget to address those caseloads. I know particularly with adult protective services, this has been an issue that the committee and the department have discussed, and it has also been one that the Commission on Aging has recommended increases for as well. Last year in the FY22 budget, there was one position added, and there's the recommendation, of course, is to continue and annualize that position. This year, there is a recommendation for 6 additional positions that consists of 1 supervisor, 1 nurse, and 4 investigators, which would be a dedicated team for adult protective services. That totals just under $1 million, $954,000 in FY23. Council staff, of course, supports that and supports the increase in this area. I would note here that this is one area where if there is determined to be a need for affordability, certainly would not necessarily reduce the positions, but you could defer hiring 2 of the investigators until mid-year, which is one of the options that we were asked to look at. What could potentially be brought back in January, and again, just to phase in this increase, not to necessarily stop the increase, but again, just to potentially defer it and look at this again mid-year. That is one suggestion that I've put forward here for your consideration.
Just speaking for myself again, I really appreciate that suggestion, Ms. McGuire. I do think the Commission on Aging made pretty clear this was a very high priority of theirs, with good reason, given the circumstances that we're finding on the ground right now, and the exploitation that is really increased since the beginning of the pandemic. So I do think it's important we get this going sooner rather than later, given those concerns, and the fact that it's already in the county exec's budget makes it easier for us rather than having to put it on reconciliation. So I think keeping it here makes sense to me. I don't know how colleagues feel about that. Councilmember Rice agrees. Council Vice President Glass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So then just to wrap us up here on page 19 in your packet, there are just a handful of additional items that I want to highlight for the committee's attention, and certainly can stop and discuss any that the committee is interested in following up on. There is an additional position in the executive's budget to support the long-term ombudsman program in the area Agency on Aging. Again, this is an area where there are increasingly complex cases and an increasing number of cases, and that additional position has also been recommended and supported by the Commission on Aging as well. Council staff certainly supports the addition of that position in the budget. I would note that there are ongoing discussions with the state regarding the partnership around nursing home inspections. I know, again, this is one of those ongoing issues. My understanding from executive staff is that, again, hopefully, well, I guess we shouldn't hope for a time frame, but certainly as those discussions come to fruition and come to an outcome, that outcome will be brought back to the committee and we can take it up at that time. But until then, my understanding is that the status quo would stay in place during those discussions.
Okay.
There is, the recommended budget does return the escorted transportation program to its pre-COVID funding levels. That's an important program to provide access to many individuals, and certainly that's also a program that the Commission on Aging had supported an increase in. It was temporarily decreased during COVID, really just to reflect the fact that there was less use. I don't think there was ever any intent for that to continue, and this budget does restore it to its pre-COVID levels. Commission on Aging, I believe, is interested in further increases, and my understanding from the department is that that can be evaluated as we move forward over the next year with this increased funding, and certainly could always be brought back.
Sounds good.
Finally, wanted to highlight one program that again has been raised by the Commission on Aging, but I certainly understand from the department that they have also begun discussions around this program with the state called Access Hears, and it does help provide hearing assistance to low-income seniors. So again, I don't know if Ms. Brunetto would like to speak more about this, but I do understand that DHHS, again, has started to work towards an implementation of this initiative.
Certainly, thank you so much. We have had discussions with Secretary Kramer, the Department of Aging, and the Secretary has identified ARPA funds that she has in her budget, and as part of this project with Secretary Kramer, a portion of those funds would be dedicated to this new program, Access Years. And so we have received verbal approval from Secretary Kramer, and we are now working on the paperwork processing. But in the meanwhile, we have begun to speak with the agency called Access Years. They are located in Baltimore City. And so we are drafting a potential contract together with the scope of service, etc. And we would, of course, when the time comes, put the appropriation in front of the County Council for approval. And we may also need to have this particular contract be placed on the list for the council to approve.
I totally agree. And then as we discussed briefly, Ms. McGuire, and for my colleagues on the committee, I'd like to come back to this issue. This was a new one for me. Quite understandably, a growing issue, a growing concern, really impacts quality of life and overall health for many reasons. And so I would like to hear more about what we're doing, what we can do, and what some of the best practices are that are out there. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much. And just wanted to let folks know that we actually have one of the largest deaf and hard of hearing populations in the state and in the region. My mother worked for on the campus of Gallaudet University at both Model Secondary School for the Deaf and Gallaudet for over 35 years. This is something that's near and dear to my heart, so I'm very happy to see, because oftentimes what happens is people get substandard hearing aids, something that they'll buy at a drugstore or whatever the case may be, and really does not do them justice and actually makes their hearing worse and exacerbates the current existing problems that they're having instead of actually having it treated. Folks don't understand that actually an amplified signal into an already damaged ear can actually make it worse for your hearing than better. And so it really is one where, again, these devices need to be tuned specifically to the particular individual and how their hearing is being impacted. And so we're recommending that everyone actually go to a doctor and utilize analysis of what your hearing loss is so that you can get it accurately treated. My father, who has hearing aids, who gets his regularly adjusted, fortunately, he's a veteran and so gets them from the VA. But even just getting people connected. A lot of folks don't realize that because they're in the VA, they could actually get hearing aids as well, in addition to their other benefits that they have. And so from that perspective, there's a lot more that we can do. And so I'm really, really happy to see Secretary Kramer, who's a great friend of Montgomery County, a great friend of this community, and a great friend of the aging, as the Secretary of Aging, to really be committed to this effort. And so I think there's a lot more that we can do collectively as a community. And so look forward to this follow-up meeting. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Brunetto, and thank you, Dr. Kroll.
Thank you. Ms. Lambert, I think I see you have your hand up. I apologize if I missed it, if it was up earlier.
No, I did not have my hand up.
Okay. It's the hand from my mouse from the that's hilarious, from the Zoom.
That concludes.
That was a test, Ms. Lambert. I was just checking to make sure you were paying attention. So thank you. Great. That's awesome. Okay, I did have one item that's not on the agenda, Ms. McGuire, and this is my fault for not having raised this with you earlier, but in our last budget session, I remembered that we had discussed coming back to a multi-generational concept pilot program that we had explored potentially using ARPA funds for, but there was some concern about ARPA funds' ability to cover that pilot. And so I would love for us to maybe but before we go back to full council, go back and look at what we had discussed before. What we had talked about was about $100,000 appropriation that would go towards a yet to be determined convening organization, someone like, not necessarily, but someone like the Collaboration Council. But there had been expressions of interest from more than just one organization in establishing some multi-generational programming that had been carried out organically during the pandemic and was very effective in addressing the isolation issues, both for the youth and the seniors, and stumbled into a really moving best practice. And not saying we'll be able to fund it, but I just had committed to those organizations last year that we would talk about this, and so we need to talk about it again.
Thank you. I'm happy to, as you said, sort of pull together the latest information on that in the last committee discussion and bring that back to one of the follow-up sessions.
Great. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ms. McGuire. Anything else?
That's it. That wraps up the packet for today. And again, we'll reconvene next week to continue picking up other service areas.
Great. Thank you all so much. So with that, our session this afternoon is adjourned. Thanks,
Thank you all. Stay safe, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
We will